I want to cover the mysqldump command when working with MySQL. So before we do that, I want to get into showing you what a seed SQL script would look like. That's a seed SQL script here. And so if I open that up in my browser in VS Code, we're going to see that this is just a script, a SQL script, structured query language script, that creates a database if it doesn't exist. It's going to be called my database. It's going to go ahead and switch to use my database. It's going to go ahead and create the table if it doesn't exist. And that's the users table. And here are the fields. There's an ID that's an auto increment field. It would be automatically inserted and incremented right by 1 every time a new row or record is inserted. This is going to be the primary key as well. There's going to be a username of varchar, an email of varchar, different sizes, 50 and 100 correspondingly. So this is our schema. This is what we mean by having a schema. A schema is what are the fields in what tables, right? In what database, right? This is laying this stuff out, what I have highlighted here. Now, what I have highlighted here, this is what we call the data. This is the data that's going to be inserted into the database based on this schema. So this is doing both, having the schema being created and also inserting the data. So one thing we could do is we can go into MySQL here. We'll go into MySQL and we can execute these. Root and ask me for the password. I can go ahead and create, for example, a database here, right? I can run all these commands that we have here. Create database if it doesn't exist. I could do this, right? I can go ahead and do this and do it one by one. And it's going to say, sure, it's created, but I want to drop this database because I don't want to do it manually. This is the whole point of doing it in a script. So here, I dropped it. So what's the whole point of doing it in the script? Well, doing it in the script means that if we do that in the script and I'm working on my local host, the idea is that when we move it to the staging environment, the staging server or the QA, or it could be the dev, right, the development server, and then after that, we're going to move that and deploy that to the QA environment. And then after that, we'll deploy it to the production environment. Well, we have to make sure that we create the same things, right? We got to be consistent. So this is a great way to be consistent among the different environments. So it's okay if you do it manually one by one, as long as you keep adding to this seed SQL file so that when you move it over to the next environment, you're not going to forget to do one of these. Right, so how do we run this? Instead of doing it manually, I can copy and paste and do that manually and then do this manually and so on and so forth. But how do we run this whole file, this whole SQL file manually? Well, it's simple. That's a beauty that I want to show you all. And this is, if you go here and you see that I have the seed SQL over here, I can go ahead and run MySQL with the user flag as root and the password flag so that it can ask me what my password is. And then I'm going to say, hey, feed this seed file over to this. And it's going to ask me for my password. And then it's going to say, then I'll be able to go in here and see that it did create that. And I can use database, my database, right? And then I can say show tables, and then I'll be able to see the users, right? So if I select everything from users, I'll be able to see that I have exactly the same rows as we had here, and it's auto incremented. So that's beautiful about, being able to have a seed file. It doesn't have to be called seed. It could be, you can call it anything, but I just called it seed so that the concept remains that we can kind of feed the schema and the data over to a brand new database, for example. So the cool thing about this too is that even if I didn't have the seed, imagine that I wanted to, grab a quick dump of the database. One of the things I could do is I can do the mysqldump command, and this is what I wanted to show you. mysqldump user flag for root and P for the password, and I'm going to go ahead and take my database, and I'm going to feed it to backup of my database .sql, and I can put the date or anything like that if you really wanted to. I'm not going to do that, but you can see where I'm going with it. And it's going to ask me for my password. And if I then say, hey, what's this file? Let's look up this file. What is it? Here I can look it up, and you're gonna be able to see that I have the schema of the table, and also I have the fields, right? That's a schema, and then I have the fields here, which are going to be insert into users values, John Doe, Jane Doe, and Alice, for example. So what can I do with this? This means that then I can go ahead and always upgrade or refresh, right? Update a database from one environment to another environment. So maybe I want to do a refresh on our dev database from a prod database. So imagine that we got this backup, this MySQL dump from production, and what we want to do is refresh our development or QA environment. Well, one thing we could do is we can just say, hey, look, go ahead and, well, let me just type it all over again. We can say MySQL-u for root for user dash password, so it can ask me my password. And I'm going to say for my database, go ahead and feed, look at the piping. This is the other way around now. My database, and then I'm going to say backup of my database. And if I run this, it's going to ask me for my password. And it just updated this database with the contents of this schema and the data here. And that's the beauty of MySQL dump. I hope this was helpful.